Alrighty, in this video, what we're going to do is we are going to bring Browserify into our example project, and we're going to execute it with Gulp. Now, in the last video, I showed you guys how ridiculously simple it was to get up and running with Browserify using the command line, and you absolutely could go into package.json and write a Browserify script in here so that you only have to type in something like npm run Browserify or npm run Watchify and have all of the command line options preset in your package.json. But I don't think that's the most optimal way in a project, particularly anything beyond a small project, to go about doing it. There could be a variety of different parameters you might want to pass into Browserify as you start using it more, maybe different plugins or different transforms that you might want to put into it. You might want to have more control. So the solution to that is to execute Browserify and Watcherify from your Gulp file. So I'm going to show you guys how to, well, do that in this video in the context of our little example application we've been bringing along for the ride. So if you want to follow along, be sure to grab your example application, copy it to a new directory, and do an npm install to make sure you have all of your Node modules. Now, we will be using Babel. We'll be using Babel to take all of our source scripts and turning them into CommonJS modules. So as remember, now we're using ES 2015 code for all of our scripts, and we want this application.js file to be bundled to turn into a single bundle that we can load up into our page, like what we kind of showed in the last video. So because we're using Browserify, we're gonna have to make sure that we're using either CommonJS or UMD. Remember, UMD is both CommonJS and AMD compatible. We won't be able to use AMD or System.js without some additional transforms that we're not going to be talking about. So we got to make sure that everything is being compiled into CommonJS modules. And of course, we do that by opening up our Babel RC. And in this case, we can leave it as is because the ES 2015 preset has a default of using CommonJS. But if we wanted to make it explicit, we could come down here and let me go ahead and change the language mode real fast to JSON. We can come down here and add a plugins and make that an array, and then throw in transform-es2015-modules-commonjs. I kind of like having it be a little bit explicit here because then people looking at your Babel RC know that you are intending to compile down to CommonJS modules, and you're not just relying on whatever the default of the ES 2015 preset is. But anyway, now that we have that, Babel is configured, and Babel's already installed. As you can see in our package.json, we have all this stuff already installed for us. So let's go ahead and pull down Browserify. Now, the cool thing is Browserify, Babelify, and Watchify, those packages that we use from the command line are actually pretty much going to be the exact same packages that we install to use them from within the Node.js runtime. So we can go ahead and install all of those packages that we're going to be needing here. And we're going to do that by typing in npm install, and we're going to grab Babelify, Browserify, Watchify, and we're going to do a save dev. There is actually a couple other modules that we're going to need to pull down. And I guess I'll describe why we need those other modules while this installs. So Browserify works with Node streams, which sounds like a great thing because Gulp is all based around streams. But as you know from our videos or from our discussion on Gulp, Gulp works with the Vinyl FS, the Vinyl file system format, where the node streams are in object mode and they pass in these little file objects. Now, Browserify will give us a stream when we use it directly from the Node API, but it's just going to be a normal file stream. So we need a way to convert it from a normal file stream into a buffered Vinyl FS stream in order to use it with Gulp. So to do that, we're going to grab a couple other modules. I'm going to npm install, and then I'm going to grab or pull down our Vinyl source stream and our Vinyl buffer. And I'll save dev those as well. So Vinyl source stream is what converts a, of course, we need to spell those things correctly. So that was my bad. It's VINYL. So vinyl source stream is going to take our Babel or our Browserify stream and convert it into a vinylfs object, which Gulp will then understand. We can pass that stream back into the Gulp runtime so that we get all those awesome features. So that Gulp knows when the stream has finished, and we can pipe it into Gulp Dest, as well as pipe it into any other Gulp plugins we might want to, such as Uglify. And then, of course, our vinyl buffer is a package that'll convert a streaming vinyl file system file into a buffered vinyl file system file. And some, or rather most, of the plugins we might want to pipe in our Gulp pipeline will require that our thing is buffered and not streaming. So we need both of those packages to work with this. All right, so now I'm going to pop over to my Gulp.js file, and I'll just nuke my dev scripts task entirely. And then I'm going to go to the top here, and I'm going to pull down all the modules that we're going to be needing in order to work with this. So we're going to need Browserify. So I'll say Browserify equals require Browserify. We're going to need Babelify, which Babelify is the transform, if you recall from last video. It's the transform that pushes all of our code from Browserify, all of our JavaScript code, through Babel before it gets used by Browserify. So it's important to note we're not using Babel from within Gulp. We're not using Gulp to give Browserify the stuff it's working with, but we at some point have to compile our ES 2015 code into ES5 or ES3 code, and so we need to plug in another plugin into Browserify in order for Babel to work. So we're not using the Gulp Babel plugin here, is what I'm trying to say. We need to grab in Babelify. And then we're also going to need to pass or grab in our Watchify. Another interesting note, so we're not going to use Gulp's watching abilities ourselves. We're going to use Watchify to do the watching for us. And then we're going to pass in, I'm going to do source equals require vinyl source stream. You know, generally, when you require in a module, you're going to use the exact name of the module as the variable you assign it to. But for most Gulp files that I've seen that pull down vinyl source stream, they use source to refer to this. So this is kind of a standard convention. Same with this. You'll usually say buffer equals require vinyl buffer. So, of course, you can name these whatever you want, but I encourage using something that you'll see in the majority of the Gulp files out in the wild. Anyway, so now we have our dev scripts task, and what I want the dev scripts task to do is I want it to go ahead and launch Browserify with the Babelify plugin, and then pipe it into Gulp and get everything running. So let's go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and instantiate a Browserify instance. You can kind of think of it like that. We're not yet telling it to perform its bundle, but we are going to sort of configure a instance of Browserify that we can use. So I'm going to go ahead and say const bundler equals Browserify. And then for Browserify, it's gonna want two parameters here, and the first one is gonna be the target bundle that we have. So in this case, it's gonna be source scripts application JS, because that's the bundle that we want to create. So I'm gonna do source scripts application.js. Now, second parameter are options, and these are the options that you would traditionally pass into the command line argument itself. And the option I want to pass in is debug equals true. That'll result in source maps being generated, which are very, very important when doing development. Practically any option that you can supply from the command line can be supplied here through code, and you can look at the documentation to find out which parameters are supported and what their names are when you directly invoke Browserify. Anyway, then I'm going to say bundler.transform, and I'm going to pass in Babelify. So what this does is this just says we want to use the Babelify transform on this particular bundler instance. Pretty straightforward, the same thing we would do when running it through the command line. So, of course, this will go out and this will make it so all of our ES 2015 code turns into CommonJS modules. Because remember, Browserify doesn't understand ES 2015 modules. It has to be transpiled first, and we're using Babel to do that. So then I'm going to actually go ahead and perform the bundle. So again, this is kind of just a configured instance of Browserify. It hasn't yet done anything. So how do we make it do something? Well, I'm simply going to return bundler.bundle. Now, we're not done quite yet. We still have to do more things. But at this point, we now have a Node.js stream of the contents of that bundle. So this is just a straight up stream of text that represents our entire bundle. But we have a problem here. Because we're returning this in a Gulp task, we need it to be understood by Gulp. Gulp needs to get, like I said before, a vinyl FS file stream. So to do that, we simply pipe it. Oops, that's not how you spell pipe. Pipe it into source. And remember, source is the vinyl source stream plugin. And source accepts a parameter. Because, again, this is just a straight up stream of text, and we need to turn it into a virtual file object, we need to provide it with a name. And this is the name that's going to be used by Gulp to emit this file, the compiled bundle, into the file system. So I can go ahead and I can call this application.js, which would make sense because that's what the source file is. But just to point out here that this file name has no correlation to what the source files were, I'm just going to call it bundle.js. Next up, I'm going to pipe it into buffer. And I'm doing this, I'm going to mark this as optional and talk about it for a quick second. Again, like I said earlier, buffer is going to turn a streaming vinyl FS object, or file rather, into a buffered vinyl FS file. And again, that's important if you want to do further processing. If we want to pass this into our favorite Gulp plugins, like Uglify, for example, to do minification, or any other Gulp plugin that you might want to do additional transforms on. Some Gulp plugins support streaming vinyl FS files. Some only support buffered, and some support both. So go ahead, and I'm just leaving this in here, and I want to make just a big point out of this because although we don't need it in this particular circumstance, if you start playing around with this and get into more complex scenarios, you might start running into some nasty errors. Not all plugins that don't support streaming vinyl FS files are going to give you an error saying please use vinyl buffer. They might just randomly throw an error out of nowhere that doesn't make any sense. So I'm making just a point of showing this to you guys in case you run into errors when you pipe it into further plugins. But anyway, at this point it's done. We browserified the application.js. We've converted it into a vinyl FS file. We buffered that file, which is unnecessary in this instance. But now we can pipe it directly into the file system. So I'm going to pipe it into gulp.dest, and the destination is going to be public. Let's just do build. It doesn't really matter where we stick that. And so now we have return bundle or bundle, and that's it. So if we hop back over here, I can go ahead and say Gulp. I'll collapse this for you guys. And I'll do that. So I'll do, oh, come on. There we go. Gulp dev scripts, and let's hope it doesn't error out. And it does error out. Of course it does. Cannot find module application.js from 03 Browserify. So, let's see here. Just a small little typo. So that's not how you spell scripts. I'm sure you guys caught that while I was typing. But anyway, so now we're running into the interesting errors that need to be addressed. And it comes back from what we were talking about in the last video, where Browserify is going to be loading in node modules. So modules that are located in our node modules directory. And that's how it's going to be pulling in dependencies that aren't relative paths. So for example, in our application.js, notice how we're not including jQuery here. That is a bug. That'll be fixed for you guys in the future who have the source of this. You notice in our controllers, for example, we import things like jQuery and jQuery UI, but they're not relatively pathed. So Browserify has no way of knowing where to grab this from, so it's going to defer to how NPM itself would, or rather Node.js itself, would resolve these modules by inspecting our node modules directory. So that just means that we have to make sure jQuery, jQuery UI, and Lodash are all added into our node modules directory. It also means that I do have to fix this little bug here where I'm using the jQuery object, but I'm not importing it. It's even warning me in Visual Studio Code, but I must have missed that. So I'll just go ahead and import money from jQuery here. So that'll fix that. Okay, so let's go ahead and install our dependencies. So what are our external module dependencies? Well, we're going to do npm install jQuery -UI, And we're also going to pull down Lodash, and we're going to save dev or save these. So once we have these, Browserify should be able to locate these modules and compile them into our bundle, which would be super awesome. All right, let's go ahead and run our dev scripts again. And we get success. So now, if I hop on over to our public build, we now have this bundle.js file, and it contains everything. It contains jQuery, it contains jQuery UI, it contains Lodash, and it also contains all of our custom code, like what we have right here. So all of the additional application level code that we have. So this bundle is our entire application bundled up into one JavaScript file. So let's go ahead and see if it works. I'm going to hop into index.html. And down here at the bottom, I'm going to add a script tag for source is build bundle.js. And then inside of my command window, I'm going to start another window. I'm going to cd into public, and I'm going to run my HTTP server. And then I'm going to go ahead and load that up in my browser, which is port 8080 by default. And if we hop on over here, you do see my styles have not been built, so I'm going to gulp dev styles real fast because we need my styles. And we have styles and we have functionality. Now, we do not have the jQuery UI CSS, however. But I think we're going to do that in the next video when we throw in how to load CSS with Browserify. And that'll allow us to pull in CSS from external modules. But, okay, just to recap, basically what we have going on here is we have a awesome little gulp file here that uses Browserify directly. If you're interested about the additional parameters you can pass in here, certainly go out and check out their documentation. They have this really nice little handbook that I think I showed in the last video that helps out quite a bit. But we have the basic Browserify added in, and so in the next video we're going to take a look at some more features, such as how to use additional loaders and how to work with Watchify, in Gulp anyway. All right, we'll see you guys then.